The universe is not impressed by how confident you sound. It does not care about titles, degrees, or traditions. It only responds to one thing, whether you actually understand what's going on. Understanding the universe is not about collecting facts like trophies. It's about tearing ideas apart until nothing fake survives. Most people confuse knowing words with knowing things. They can name a phenomenon, define it, even teach it. Yet the moment you ask, why does it behave this way, silence appears. That silence is the border between memorization and understanding. To truly understand anything, you must be willing to look stupid first. You must ask questions that sound childish, simple, even embarrassing. Because nature does not reward sophistication, it rewards accuracy. If something is true, it will survive questioning. If it's false, it deserves to die. And here's the uncomfortable part. Authority means nothing to reality. An idea isn't correct because a famous person said it. It's correct because repeated experiments agree with it. When theory and experiment disagree, the theory loses every time. That's humility at the scale of the universe. Understanding also demands brutal honesty with yourself. If you cannot explain an idea in plain language, you do not own it. Complex jargon does not equal depth. It often hides confusion. Clarity is not simplicity for the weak. Clarity is simplicity earned through hard thinking. Another thing most people fear: uncertainty. They want final answers, permanent conclusions, mental comfort. But the universe doesn't work that way. Not knowing is not a failure. Pretending to know is. Progress comes from standing at the edge of ignorance and leaning forward, not from building fake certainty to feel safe. Curiosity is not passive interest. It is an aggressive desire to understand how things really work, even when the answer threatens your beliefs. And maybe the most important idea of all, understanding the universe should be joyful. Wonder is not separate from rigor. You can be precise without becoming dull. You can be serious without killing curiosity. The universe is not just a machine to analyze. It is a mystery that invites exploration, rewards honesty, and punishes intellectual laziness. If you want to understand it, don't worship ideas. Don't fear questions. Don't hide behind complexity. Ask, test, explain, repeat. That is how the universe reveals itself, not to the loudest voice, but to the most curious mind. Understanding beats memorization. Memorization is cheap. Anyone can memorize. A parrot can memorize. A hard drive can store more facts than any human who has ever lived. If memorization were intelligence, Google would be the smartest mind on earth. But it isn't, because knowing information is not the same as knowing reality. Understanding means something very different. Understanding means you can take an idea apart, turn it upside down, break, rebuild it, and still recognize it. It means the knowledge lives in your mind, not just on your tongue. When memorization fails, and it always does under pressure, understanding survives. Most education systems train people to repeat answers, not to ask questions. Students learn formulas without knowing where they came from. They learn laws without knowing why nature obeys them. They learn conclusions without ever touching the reasoning that produced them. This creates an illusion of knowledge, impressive on exams, useless in real thinking. The universe does not reward memorization. It rewards insight. You can memorize every equation about motion and still have no idea why something falls. You can recite definitions of energy and still not understand what energy is. When memorized knowledge meets a new problem, one not seen before, it collapses. Understanding adapts. Understanding transfers. Understanding creates. Real understanding begins the moment you say, "I don't get this yet." That sentence scares people because it exposes ignorance. But ignorance exposed is the first step toward truth. Ignorance hidden behind memorized words is permanent. If you truly understand something, you can explain it without hiding behind technical language. Jargon is not intelligence. It's often camouflage. Simplicity is not dumbing down. It is distillation. It takes far more mental effort to explain an idea clearly than to repeat it in complicated terms. Clarity is proof of ownership. Nature itself is brutally honest. It does not care how elegant your explanation sounds. It only responds to what actually works. You can memorize theories all day long, but one failed experiment is enough to expose the gap between knowing and understanding. Understanding also demands courage. It requires questioning what everyone else accepts. It requires the willingness to doubt books, teachers, traditions, not out of arrogance, but out of respect for truth. Progress has never come from obedient repetition. It has always come from someone asking an uncomfortable why. Memorization creates followers. Understanding creates thinkers. A memorized mind looks for instructions. An understanding mind looks for patterns. When something unexpected happens, the memorized mind panics. The understanding mind becomes curious. Curiosity is not a personality trait. It is a habit built by refusing to accept shallow answers. There is also joy in understanding, a deep, quiet satisfaction that memorization can never give. Memorization is mechanical. Understanding feels like suddenly seeing the picture after staring at scattered pieces. It is the moment confusion turns into clarity. That moment is addictive, and it is the engine of all discovery, but understanding is uncomfortable because it exposes how little you truly know. The deeper you go, the larger ignorance becomes. This frightens people who want certainty, final answers, and intellectual safety. But certainty is not a requirement for intelligence. Honesty is. To understand the universe, you must accept uncertainty as permanent. The goal is not to eliminate mystery, but to reduce confusion. Every answer opens better questions. That is not a flaw. That is how knowledge grows. Memorization asks, what should I remember? Understanding asks, why must it be this way and not another? That single shift changes everything. When you understand, you are no longer dependent on authority. You don't need someone to tell you what to think. You can test ideas against reality yourself. This is intellectual independence, and it is rare because it is demanding. Understanding takes time. It takes effort. It takes failure. You will be wrong many times. But being wrong while thinking is infinitely better than being correct by repetition. One builds insight. The other builds fragility. In the end, the universe is not a textbook to be memorized. It is a system to be explored. It speaks in patterns, not definitions. It rewards those who listen carefully, question deeply, and refuse to settle for surface-level explanations. Understanding beats memorization because memorization ends where learning should begin. And anyone serious about truth knows this. Facts fade, definitions change, but understanding, once earned, becomes a tool you can use forever. Question everything, especially the obvious. The most dangerous ideas are not the ones that sound strange. They are the ones that sound so familiar that no one thinks to challenge them. The obvious is comfortable. It feels safe. It feels settled. And that is exactly why it deserves suspicion. Progress does not begin by attacking the unknown. It begins by re-examining what everyone assumes is already understood. Most people live inside borrowed conclusions. They inherit explanations the way they inherit language, without remembering when or why they accepted them. Once an idea becomes common, it stops being questioned. Once it stops being questioned, it stops being examined. And the moment examination ends, thinking ends. The universe does not label anything as obvious. That label exists only in the human mind. Nature simply behaves the way it does. When something feels obvious, it usually means we have grown accustomed to it, not that we have understood it. Familiarity is not evidence of truth. Repetition is not proof. Questioning the obvious is uncomfortable because it threatens stability. It forces you to admit that what you know might be incomplete or worse, wrong. That discomfort is not a weakness. It is the price of intellectual honesty. Every meaningful discovery has required someone to tolerate that discomfort longer than others were willing to. The obvious often survives not because it is correct, but because it is convenient. It fits into existing beliefs. It reduces mental effort. It avoids conflict. But convenience has no relationship with reality. The universe does not simplify itself to protect our comfort. When you stop questioning the obvious, you stop learning. You begin defending ideas instead of testing them. You confuse familiarity with understanding. At that point, knowledge becomes fragile. It works only as long as nothing unexpected happens. True questioning is not rebellion for its own sake. It is not cynicism. It is not disrespect. It is curiosity paired with discipline. To question something properly, you must be willing to follow the answer wherever it leads, even if it contradicts your expectations. The obvious collapses quickly under honest questioning. Ask where an idea came from. Ask what assumptions it depends on. Ask what evidence supports it and what evidence could destroy it. If an idea cannot survive those questions, it does not deserve your confidence. Children ask powerful questions because they have not yet learned what they are not supposed to question. Over time, that instinct is trained out of them. Society rewards obedience more than curiosity. Exams reward correct answers, not good questions. Slowly, questioning becomes a risk instead of a habit. But the universe does not care what you were taught not to question. It only cares about what is true. Many of history's biggest mistakes were built on obvious ideas. Ideas so accepted that no one thought to test them. Once questioned, they collapsed quickly, revealing not stupidity, but complacency. Intelligence is not the absence of error. It is the refusal to protect error from examination. Questioning the obvious also reveals hidden complexity. What appears simple is often layered with assumptions. When you peel those layers back, you discover mechanisms, constraints, and patterns that were invisible before. That is where understanding deepens. There is also humility in questioning. It reminds you that your perspective is limited, that your experience is not universal, that certainty should always be provisional. This humility is not passive. It sharpens perception. It keeps the mind flexible. Some people fear that constant questioning leads to chaos. It does not. Blind acceptance leads to chaos. Questioning is what builds reliable knowledge. Structures that cannot survive questioning were never stable to begin with. When you question the obvious, you regain ownership of your thinking. You stop outsourcing judgment to authority. You stop mistaking consensus for truth. You begin interacting directly with reality, not secondhand interpretations of it. This does not mean rejecting everything. It means earning belief instead of inheriting it. It means holding ideas tentatively, ready to adjust them when evidence demands it. Strength of mind is not stubbornness. It is adaptability. The obvious is seductive because it feels complete, but completeness is an illusion. The universe is deeper than first impressions. Every surface explanation hides better questions underneath. Questioning everything does not make life harder. It makes it clearer. Confusion decreases as assumptions are exposed. Thinking becomes cleaner, sharper, more precise. In the end, questioning the obvious is not about being different. It is about being accurate. Reality does not reward agreement. It rewards those who ask the right questions and refuse to stop at comfortable answers. The obvious is where most people stop. That is exactly why it is where serious thinking begins. Nature doesn't care about your opinions. It never has, and it never will. The universe does not listen to arguments, intentions, or confidence. It does not adjust itself to fit beliefs, traditions, or personal preferences. It operates by rules that exist independently of what anyone thinks about them. You may dislike those rules, misunderstand them, or deny them entirely, and nothing will change. Opinion is cheap because it costs nothing to hold. Reality is expensive because it demands evidence. You can argue endlessly about how something should work, but nature responds only to how it does work. When belief and reality collide, reality wins without explanation or apology. This is why experiments matter. Not because scientists enjoy complexity, but because nature refuses to answer to words. It answers only to tests. A theory is not validated by how logical it sounds or how many people agree with it. It is validated by whether nature behaves the way the theory predicts. One failed prediction is enough to expose an error, no matter how elegant the idea. Human history is full of confident opinions that reality crushed. People once believed heavier objects fell faster than lighter ones. It felt obvious. It matched intuition. Nature disagreed. No amount of arguing could convince gravity to cooperate with opinion. Only observation forced correction. Nature is brutally fair. It treats all ideas equally by testing them. It shows no favoritism to authority, tradition, or popularity. An unknown thinker with a correct model will always outperform a famous thinker with a wrong one. Truth is not a vote. This indifference is not cruelty. It is clarity. Because nature does not care, it provides a reliable standard. Personal bias cannot bend it. Emotional attachment cannot soften it. This makes nature the ultimate referee in every intellectual dispute. The danger begins when people confuse explanation with control. Naming something does not grant power over it. Describing a law does not make it optional. Understanding is not command, it is alignment. You do not tell the universe what to do. You learn what it does and work with it. Opinions feel powerful because they are internal. They create certainty without effort. But that certainty is fragile. The moment it is tested against reality, it either adapts or shatters. Refusing to test opinions does not protect them. It merely delays failure. Reality has no obligation to be intuitive. Many truths feel wrong at first. They contradict common sense. They challenge everyday experience. This is not because nature is strange. It is because human intuition evolved for survival, not accuracy. When intuition conflicts with evidence, intuition must yield. Nature also does not explain itself. It does not offer comfort or meaning. It simply behaves. Any understanding we gain is earned through careful observation, measurement, and repeated testing. This makes knowledge slow, difficult, and incredibly valuable. Respecting nature's indifference is a form of intellectual maturity. It forces humility. It reminds you that being convinced is not the same as being correct. It teaches restraint, to wait for evidence before forming conclusions, and to remain willing to abandon them when evidence changes. This attitude extends beyond science. In any system governed by reality, economics, engineering, health, technology, opinions detached from evidence fail. Bridges collapse, markets crash, bodies break. Reality enforces its rules without debate. Nature does not punish ignorance out of malice. It simply reveals it. Failure is not personal. It is informational. It shows where understanding ends and assumption begins. Those who learn from this adjust. Those who argue with reality repeat the same mistakes. There is freedom in accepting that nature does not care. It removes the burden of defending beliefs. It shifts focus from being right to finding out. It replaces ego with curiosity. Instead of asking, "Do I believe this?" you ask, "Does it work?" Progress depends on this mindset. Every advance comes from submitting ideas to reality and accepting the outcome even when it disappoints. This is not submission in a weak sense. It is alignment with the only judge that cannot be fooled. In the end, opinions are stories we tell ourselves. Nature is the story that continues whether we listen or not. Understanding grows when we stop trying to persuade the universe and start paying attention to it. Nature doesn't care about your opinions, and that is precisely why it can teach you the truth. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. That statement sounds harsh, but it is precise. Complexity often feels impressive, yet it is usually the refuge of confusion. When an idea is truly understood, it becomes flexible. It can be reshaped, translated, and expressed in different forms without losing its meaning. When it is not understood, it becomes rigid, dependent on exact wording, formulas, or jargon to survive. Many people mistake difficult language for deep thinking. They hide behind technical terms, not because the idea requires them, but because they themselves are unsure what the idea actually means. Complicated explanations can create the illusion of intelligence, but illusion collapses the moment clarity is demanded. Simplicity is not the absence of depth, it is the result of depth. To explain something simply, you must see its structure clearly. You must know what is essential and what is decoration. You must understand cause and effect, not just labels and outcomes. This takes work. It takes struggling with the idea until it becomes transparent. A memorized explanation cannot be simplified. It breaks if you try. An understood idea can be rebuilt from scratch. You can start from first principles, use analogies, draw examples, and still arrive at the same conclusion. That is how you know the idea is yours. The test of understanding is transfer. Can you apply the idea in a new situation? Can you teach it to someone without assuming prior knowledge? Can you answer unexpected questions without panicking? If the answer is no, then the knowledge is incomplete. Simplicity also exposes flaws. When you try to explain something clearly, gaps appear. Assumptions become visible. Weak reasoning reveals itself. This is uncomfortable, which is why many avoid simplifying. It forces confrontation with what you do not yet understand. The universe itself is not complicated in expression. It is precise in behavior. The laws that govern it are simple in form, even if their consequences are rich and complex. Complexity emerges from simple rules interacting, not from vague or mystical explanations. Clear explanations respect the listener. They assume intelligence, not prior expertise. They invite engagement rather than intimidation. Confusion does not make an idea more true, it only makes it less accessible. There is also honesty in simplicity. It prevents exaggeration. It prevents hiding uncertainty behind fancy words. When something is not fully understood, simplicity forces you to say, "This part is still unclear." That admission is not weakness. It is accuracy. Education fails when it rewards repetition instead of explanation. Students learn to recite without understanding. They pass exams yet cannot explain what they have learned in their own words. This creates fragile knowledge that disappears under pressure. True understanding creates confidence, not arrogance. You do not need to dominate a conversation or impress an audience. You can explain calmly, clearly, and adapt to the listener. You are not protecting the idea. You are sharing it. Simplicity is also a tool for discovery. When you try to simplify an idea, you often discover better questions. You strip away unnecessary detail and see the core problem more clearly. This leads to deeper insight. The fear of oversimplification is often exaggerated. Oversimplification removes truth. True simplicity preserves it. The difference lies in understanding. Without understanding, simplification distorts. With understanding, it clarifies. In any field, the best thinkers are the clearest communicators, not because they aim to be popular, but because clarity is the natural byproduct of deep comprehension. They know what matters and what does not. If you want to know whether you truly understand something, try to explain to a curious child or to yourself without notes. If you stumble, if you rely on memorized phrases, if the explanation collapses, the work is not finished. Understanding is not proven by how much you can say. It is proven by how little you need to say without losing meaning. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. Not yet. And that yet is an invitation to think harder, dig deeper, and earn clarity instead of performing intelligence. Uncertainty is not weakness, it's intellectual honesty. The desire for certainty is one of the strongest human instincts. We want clear answers, fixed conclusions, and solid ground beneath our thinking. Certainty feels safe, it feels like control. But the universe does not offer that kind of comfort. It offers evidence, probabilities, patterns, and a constant reminder that our understanding is always incomplete. Pretending to be certain does not make you intelligent, it makes you rigid. Intellectual weakness is not saying, "I don't know." Intellectual weakness is being afraid to say it. The moment you claim absolute certainty, you stop listening. You stop testing, you stop learning, you replace curiosity with defense, and defense has never discovered anything new. Honest thinking begins where confidence ends. It begins with the recognition that every explanation is provisional, useful, but not sacred. Reality does not reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself slowly, through error, correction, and refinement. Certainty blocks that process. Uncertainty keeps it alive. Many people treat doubt as a flaw, as something to be eliminated. In truth, doubt is a tool. It keeps ideas flexible. It forces them to face evidence repeatedly. Without doubt, beliefs harden into dogma, and dogma resists reality instead of learning from it. The universe is not built on final answers. It is built on patterns that work until they don't. Every law, every model, every explanation has limits. Acknowledging those limits is not surrender, it is accuracy. Ignoring them is arrogance. Uncertainty also separates belief from evidence. Belief demands commitment. Evidence demands attention. When you admit uncertainty, you shift from defending ideas to investigating them. That shift is the foundation of progress. There is a difference between being confused and being uncertain. Confusion is lack of understanding. Uncertainty is understanding the boundaries of your knowledge. One is temporary ignorance. The other is intellectual maturity. History rewards those who were comfortable being uncertain. Every major advancement came from someone willing to admit that existing explanations were incomplete. They did not destroy certainty recklessly. They questioned it carefully. That care made discovery possible. People often mistake confidence for competence. A confident voice can sound convincing even when it is wrong. Nature is not impressed by confidence. It responds only to what is correct. Uncertainty, paired with testing, is far more reliable than confidence without evidence. Living with uncertainty requires courage. It means resisting the urge to close questions prematurely. It means tolerating ambiguity while continuing to think clearly. This is difficult, which is why certainty is so tempting. But temptation is not a guide to truth. Uncertainty also protects against self-deception. When you accept that you may be wrong, you are more likely to notice errors. You become alert instead of defensive. You trade pride for precision. Some fear that uncertainty leads to indecision. In reality, it leads to better decisions. Acting with awareness of uncertainty encourages caution, adaptation, and revision. Acting with false certainty encourages recklessness. Intellectual honesty demands that you distinguish between what you know, what you think you know, and what you do not know. Blurring those categories creates confusion. Respecting them creates clarity. The strongest thinkers are not those with the loudest conclusions, but those with the sharpest questions. They move forward without pretending the road is finished. They revise without shame. They abandon ideas without regret when evidence demands it. Uncertainty does not paralyze progress. It guides it. It tells you where to look next. It tells you which assumptions need testing. It keeps thought dynamic. To understand the universe is not to eliminate mystery, but to engage with it honestly. Every answer opens deeper questions. That is not failure. That is success. Certainty ends conversation. Uncertainty begins discovery. Uncertainty is not weakness. It is respect for reality. It is the discipline of admitting what the evidence allows and nothing more.
What if the reason you can't think clearly has nothing to do with how smart you are? What if overthinking isn't a thinking problem at all? It's a problem of trying to think about thinking while you're already thinking. The brain doesn't work like a library where you can pull out any book at will and examine it carefully. It works more like a stream, and when you try to grab the water to see it better, you disturb the very thing you're trying to observe. Most people believe that more thinking leads to better thinking, that if you just analyze something long enough, turn it over enough times in your mind, you'll finally see it clearly. But there's something peculiar that happens when you do this. The more you think about a problem, the muddier it becomes. Not because the problem is getting harder, but because you're adding layer upon layer of thought on top of the original question. Let's look at what actually happens when someone overthinks. Imagine a student sitting with a mathematics problem. The problem itself might be straightforward. Find the area of a triangle. Simple enough. But watch what happens in the mind. First comes the actual problem. Then comes the thought. Am I doing this right? Then, what if I forget the formula? Then, I always mess these up. Then, why am I so slow at this? Pretty soon, the student isn't working on the mathematics problem anymore. They're working on an entirely different problem, a psychological one, about their own adequacy. And that problem has no solution, because it's not even a real problem. It's just noise. This is what overthinking really is. It's the mind creating secondary problems that have nothing to do with the original question. And here's what makes it particularly troublesome. These secondary problems feel important. They feel like thinking, but they're just interference. Now, the natural question is, how do you stop this? And that's where most people make another mistake. They try to stop overthinking by thinking about how to stop overthinking. They analyze their overthinking. They worry about their worry. And now they've created a third layer of problems on top of the second layer, which was already on top of the first layer. It's like trying to smooth out wrinkles in a bedsheet by crumpling it up more. So what's the alternative? The first principle is surprisingly simple. Separate the question from the questioning. When you look at any problem, whether it's mathematical, practical, or personal, there's the actual problem, and then there's everything you're adding to it. Most of the mental suffering comes from that second part. The actual problem of, how do I solve this equation, is clean. The added parts, what does it mean if I can't? Why is this so hard for me? What will happen if I fail? Those are the parts that create the tangle. Think about what happens when you read a difficult passage in a book. The passage itself has a certain meaning, but as you read, your mind starts generating commentary. This is confusing. I should understand this. Other people probably get this faster. Maybe I'm not smart enough for this material. Notice that none of this commentary helps you understand the passage. It's just noise. The passage remains exactly as difficult or easy as it was before you added all that commentary. The technique is this. When you notice the commentary starting, you don't fight it. You don't try to stop it. You simply see it for what it is, commentary, not content. It's like watching credits roll at the end of a film. You don't have to do anything with them, you just let them pass. Here's the second principle. The brain clears itself when you give it something real to do. Overthinking happens in a vacuum. When your mind has nothing concrete to work on, it starts working on itself, and that's when you get these endless loops of thought about thought about thought. But give the brain an actual task, something external and specific, and the loops stop. Picture a person lying awake at night, thinking about a conversation they had earlier. Round and round it goes. Did I say the wrong thing? What did they really mean? How should I have responded? This can go on for hours. But now imagine that same person gets up, takes out a piece of paper, and writes down exactly what was said and exactly what they wish they'd said. Suddenly, the thinking becomes productive. It has a direction. It's not overthinking anymore, it's just thinking. The key is specificity. Vague problems generate vague thinking, which generates more vague thinking endlessly. But concrete problems generate concrete thinking, which leads to concrete solutions or concrete conclusions. Even if the conclusion is, I don't know, that's concrete. You can work with that. The third principle is about time and patience. The brain solves problems at its own pace, not at the pace you demand of it. When you try to force understanding, you create pressure. And under pressure, the mind tightens up. It's like trying to remember someone's name at a party. The harder you try, the more it slips away. But the moment you stop trying and move on to something else, the name appears. This doesn't mean being lazy. It means understanding how insight actually works. You can study a problem intensely for an hour, put it aside, and find that the solution appears later while you're doing something completely unrelated, washing dishes, walking, or just staring out a window. This isn't magic. The brain continues working on problems in the background, beneath conscious awareness. But it can only do this when you're not constantly interrupting it with demands for immediate answers. Many students make this mistake. They study for an exam, and when they can't immediately recall something, they panic. They try harder, which creates more panic, which makes recall even harder. But if they simply move to a different question and come back later, the answer they couldn't remember before is suddenly obvious. Nothing changed except the pressure they were applying. Here's the deeper mechanism at work. The mind has two modes of operation. One is focused and deliberate, useful for applying known methods to clear problems. The other is diffuse and associative, useful for making connections, seeing patterns, and finding new approaches. Overthinking happens when you try to use the focused mode for problems that need the diffuse mode, or vice versa. Think of it like vision. When you look directly at something in dim light, it's hard to see. But if you look slightly to the side, letting your peripheral vision catch it, suddenly it's clear. That's because the center of your eye works differently than the periphery. They're built for different tasks. The mind works the same way. Sometimes the direct approach makes things harder to see. You need to look sideways at them. This explains why solutions often come when you're not trying. When you stop the focused effort, the diffuse mode takes over. It's been working all along, but the focused mode was drowning it out, like trying to hear a quiet conversation while shouting. So how do you use this? When you're stuck on something, genuinely stuck, the answer isn't to think harder. It's to think differently. Work on something else. Read about a different subject. Take a walk. Let the problem sit. This feels wrong because we're taught that persistence means constant effort. But real persistence means knowing when to back off and let the deeper processes do their work. Now, let's apply this to some real situations. Suppose you're writing something, an essay, a letter, a report. You write a paragraph, and then you stop. It doesn't sound right, so you rewrite it. Still not right. You rewrite it again. After an hour, you have 6 versions, each slightly different, and you can't tell which is better anymore. This is overthinking in action. What's happening? You've lost the original sense of what you wanted to say. Each rewrite moves a little further from that original intention, and now you're comparing versions without any reference point. The solution isn't to analyze them more carefully. The solution is to step away completely. Go do something else for an hour or a day. When you come back, you'll immediately see which version is clearest, or you'll see that none of them captured what you meant, and you'll write a new version that does. Or consider decision-making. Someone offers you a job, and you need to decide. You make a list of pros and cons. The list is balanced good points on both sides, so you think about it more. You add more items to the list. You weight them differently. You ask friends. You lie awake thinking about it. And the more you think, the less certain you become. This happens because you're trying to reach certainty through analysis alone. But some decisions can't be analyzed into certainty. At some point, you have to recognize that you've gathered the available information, and now you simply need to choose. The overthinking isn't helping you decide. It's just postponing the decision while creating the illusion that you're making progress. Here's a useful technique. Set a specific time limit for deliberation. Give yourself 3 days to think about it. Really think, gather information, consider the angles, but when those 3 days are up, you decide. No more analysis. This forces you to distinguish between productive thinking and wheel spinning. Or take personal worries. Someone says something that bothers you. Maybe a criticism, maybe just an offhand comment. And you replay it in your mind. What did they mean? Were they attacking you? Should you say something back? What would you say? How would they respond? You're running through entire imaginary conversations, entire scenarios that haven't happened and probably never will. The problem isn't that you're thinking about it. The problem is that you're thinking in circles. There's no new information coming in, you're just recombining the same elements over and over. And each recombination feels slightly different, which tricks you into believing you're making progress, but you're not. You're just stirring the pot. The way out is to recognize this for what it is. Rehearsal without performance. You're practicing something that doesn't need practice. The real conversation, if it happens, won't go the way you're imagining anyway. All this mental rehearsal is just burning energy. What helps? Do something physical. Write the thoughts down and be done with them. Or better yet, do something completely unrelated that requires attention. Fix something, build something, read something challenging. The key is to engage the mind with something that has resistance, something that pushes back, that breaks the loop. Here's what all of this comes down to. Clarity doesn't come from more thinking, it comes from better thinking. And better thinking isn't about quantity or intensity. It's about knowing what kind of thinking serves you and what kind just spins in place. The mind is a remarkable instrument, but like any instrument, it can be used well or poorly. A violin in skilled hands produces music. In unskilled hands, it produces noise. The violin hasn't changed, only the way it's being used. Your mind works the same way. Overthinking is just the noise that happens when you're using the instrument incorrectly. The great liberation is realizing you don't need to control every thought. You don't need to solve every uncertainty. You don't need to know everything before you act. Most of the questions that keep you awake at night aren't real questions. They're just the mind running its commentary program because it has nothing better to do. Give it something better to do. Focus on what's concrete. What do you actually need to figure out? What information do you lack? What step comes next? These are real questions with real answers. Everything else, all the what-ifs, the self-doubt, the imaginary conversations, the endless analysis that's just static. And here's the strange thing. When you stop overthinking, you don't think less. You think better. You think more clearly. Ideas come easier. Solutions appear faster. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're getting out of your own way. The brain knows how to solve problems. It's been doing it long before you learn to second-guess it. Trust it to work. Give it real problems to chew on. Let it move at its own pace. And when it starts spinning its wheels, when you catch yourself in that familiar loop of thought about thought, just notice it. Don't fight it. Just see it for what it is, the mind's way of saying it has nothing productive to do right now. Then give it something productive, or give it nothing at all. Both work better than fighting with your own thoughts. If you found something useful here, there's more to explore. But don't explore it by thinking about what you learned. Explore it by using it. Pick one thing, just one, and try it the next time you catch yourself overthinking. That's all. One thing, one time. See what happens. The understanding comes from doing, not from analyzing the doing. And that might be the most important point of all.
There is an invisible structure that determines how far your mind can evolve. Most people spend their entire lives using only the lowest levels of thought. They repeat, they memorize, they imitate, but they don't truly think. They believe that learning means collecting information, but learning, in its purest form, is the transformation of how you think. What you're about to understand isn't a memory trick or a study hack. It's a map of the human mind, the 7 levels of thought that can turn an ordinary student into a true master of reasoning. These levels aren't just steps of knowledge. They are stages of consciousness. Each one represents a different way of interacting with reality, from the simplest, where the brain merely copies what it sees, to the highest, where the mind observes itself and masters its own process of thinking. And when you master these levels, something extraordinary happens. You stop being a slave to information and become the author of understanding. The journey begins at the most basic point, the level of remembrance. And that's exactly where most people get lost, believing that memorizing is the same as learning. Pay close attention now, because this is where almost every student in the world goes astray. The first level of the mind is remembrance, and it's deceptive. It's the level where you confuse effort with progress. The more you repeat, the more you think you've mastered something. But the truth is, the brain here only repeats without understanding. It's like a machine copying words it doesn't comprehend. It records sounds, shapes, and letters, but it doesn't create connections. At this stage, knowledge is shallow, like words written in sand. A gentle breeze, time, stress, or distraction erases everything. That's why people spend hours studying and days later remember nothing, because remembering is not understanding.
At this level, the mind works mechanically. It uses flashcards, rereading, repetition, endless summaries. It gets tired, but it doesn't grow. And the more it repeats, the more it believes it's improving. But in reality, it's just reinforcing the same cycle of superficiality. This is where the illusion of learning begins, the comfort of memorization. Because memorizing feels like progress, even when there is none. It's like running on a treadmill. The body moves, but it goes nowhere. True learning begins when you decide to question the very act of remembering. When instead of repeating, you start asking yourself, why is this like that? Where does this idea come from? How do I know that I know? That moment changes everything. It marks the shift from empty memory to living comprehension, from echo to reasoning. So from now on, to complete this level, do this. Explain as you memorize. Don't read passively. Say out loud what you just learned, even if it's still simple. This forces your brain to leave echo mode and enter understanding mode. Use visual association. Every memory needs an anchor. Turn words into images. Connect concepts to places, faces, or sensations. The brain remembers better than it understands, but it understands better than it repeats. Rewrite creatively. Take your notes and rephrase them without looking at the original. This makes your mind reconstruct, not copy. Test your memory under pressure. Close the book, stare at the ceiling, and say out loud what you recall. If you can't, don't blame yourself. That's your brain showing the path toward comprehension. And above all, avoid the comfort of repetition. Repetition feels good because it feels like progress. Question that. Remember, the easier it feels, the less real the progress is. From this point on, as your mind grows tired of repeating, curiosity begins to awaken. And that's what opens the door to the second level, understanding.
Now imagine the noise beginning to turn into sound.
The words you once repeated without meaning finally start to make sense. This is the second level of the mind, understanding. Here you stop being a repeater of information and start becoming an interpreter of knowledge. At the first level, the brain only copies. At the second, it connects. And that simple shift changes everything. It's when something inside you says, now I get it. It's the moment when knowledge stops feeling foreign and begins to feel like a part of who you are. But understanding doesn't happen by accident. It demands that you engage with the idea. You must talk to the content, question it, disagree with it, test it. The mind that truly understands is curious, not obedient. It doesn't accept truths without first breaking them apart and putting them back together. Remember, understanding isn't memorizing more clearly. It's uncovering the meaning hidden behind the word. That's why so many people believe they understand when they've merely rearranged what they memorized. True understanding is when you can explain something to someone else without looking at your notes, and it still sounds natural, fluid, and logical.
Understanding is the first step toward freeing the mind. It's when knowledge stops being a weight and starts becoming power. Start translating what you study into your own words. Close the book and say out loud what you understood. Don't use the author's language, use yours. That forces the brain to form original connections. Ask intelligent questions. Ask, why does this happen? What if it were the opposite? How does this connect with what I already know? Questioning is the fuel of comprehension. Teach yourself. Explain the content as if you were teaching a child or a friend. If you get stuck, that's where your understanding still has a gap. Build simple mind maps, not to memorize, but to see relationships. The brain understands better when it sees the structure of ideas.
Avoid rushing. Understanding requires pause, reflection, and even discomfort. When a subject feels too difficult, that's often the sign that you're close to real comprehension. When you begin to understand, something changes silently. Studying stops feeling like a burden and becomes a dialogue. And that inner dialogue prepares your mind for the next leap, the moment when knowledge becomes action. Now imagine the moment when knowledge stops being an idea on paper and becomes something you can do. This is the third level of the mind, the level of application. Here you discover whether you've truly learned or merely believed you had. Because the real test of understanding isn't in repeating what you know, it's in using what you know. This is where theory collides with reality. The mind that applies is the mind that acts. It's not content with grasping ideas. It wants to see what happens when they're tested in the real world. At the second level, you understand, but at the third, you experiment. You step out of passivity and into the territory of error, practice, and iteration. And it's exactly there that learning becomes solid. Think about it. The human brain learns more by doing than by watching. Experience builds neural connections that no book can create. You can read 100 times about swimming, but you'll never truly know the water until you get in it. The same is true of any skill. You can study 1,000 theories, but you only master something when you apply it. And here lies the great secret of those who truly evolve. They don't wait to be ready to start. They learn while doing. They fail fast, correct fast, and learn even faster. Because every act of application is a mirror. It shows you what you truly master and what still needs work. Here's a practical way to strengthen level 3. Turn theory into action. After studying a concept, do something with it. If you learned a formula, apply it to a real problem. If you read about communication, test it in a conversation. If you studied focus, practice 1 uninterrupted hour of deep work. Solve simple problems daily. Apply 1 concept at a time, 1 problem, 1 idea. This practice creates clarity and eliminates the mental chaos of trying to use everything at once. Create mini projects. Learn something new, build something small to prove you understood it. It can be a short text, a piece of code, a simple experiment, or a quick video explanation. The point is to externalize what you learned. Analyze your mistakes immediately. Mistakes are the best teachers. When something doesn't work, don't run, investigate. Ask, why did this fail? What could I have done differently? Keep the action-reflection cycle. Apply, observe, adjust, repeat. That is the rhythm of real learning. Progress doesn't move in a straight line, but in a spiral. With every turn, you rise a little higher. As the mind starts to apply, it awakens a new kind of power, the power to solve. But there's something deeper, because application is only the beginning of intelligence. The next level is learning to see what others don't. Patterns, relationships, the invisible connections between ideas. Now imagine the moment when the world begins to connect. Nothing feels isolated anymore, and each idea starts revealing hidden links to others. This is the 4th level of the mind, analysis, where thinking stops being linear and becomes systemic. Here, you no longer see pieces of information, you see relationships. While most people still try to memorize facts, the analytical mind sees how the pieces fit. It wants to understand causes and consequences, similarities and differences. It observes, compares, and quietly begins to decipher the logic of reality. This is the level where strategic thinking is born, the gaze that separates what is essential from what is noise.
Because when you understand how something connects to something else, you begin to understand the whole system. And that changes everything. Information stops being a fragment and becomes structure. Analysis is the turning point between the average student and the true thinker. Those who analyze don't accept ideas as they arrive. They take concepts apart, examine each piece, and only then decide how to rebuild them. That attitude turns learning into something living, dynamic, and personal. But be warned, analysis is demanding. It requires deeper and therefore slower thinking, and that's exactly why few remain at this level. Many confuse mental effort with error, when in truth, that discomfort is the sign that the brain is expanding. The more you compare, the more you understand. The more you take things apart, the more clarity you create. And over time, you begin to see patterns that were once invisible. That is the moment when thinking stops merely following knowledge and begins producing it. Start by comparing opposite ideas. Take two concepts and ask, in what ways are they similar? In what ways do they contradict each other? This simple exercise forces the brain to move beyond repetition and enter deep analysis. Build contrast tables. List differences, causes, and consequences between themes. It's not just about remembering, it's about seeing patterns. Create relational mind maps. Don't just connect words, connect logical relationships, cause, effect, hierarchy, dependency. See knowledge as a living organism. Ask second-level questions. Don't just ask, what is this? But rather, how is this related to that? Or, what changes if one element is altered? Comparative thinking is the training ground of the analytical mind. Accept slowness. Deep thinking is slower, but infinitely more powerful. Effort is the price of clarity and the proof that your brain is evolving. When the mind learns to analyze, it starts to think like a strategist. But something essential is still missing, the ability to judge what truly matters. Because seeing patterns is one thing, deciding which ones are relevant is another. And that's where the next level of thought is born, judgment. Pay attention now, because this is the point where thought stops being merely intelligent and becomes wise. The fifth level is the level of evaluation, of prioritization, of lucid judgment. Here you don't just understand the world, you decide what truly matters within it. So far, you've learned to remember, understand, apply, and analyze. But none of these abilities have real power unless you can choose. Knowing what to ignore is as important as knowing what to understand. A mind that cannot prioritize drowns in information. A mind that judges with clarity builds wisdom. This is the level where knowledge becomes criteria. You begin to see that not all ideas deserve the same weight. Not every argument is solid. Not every theory is applicable. Not every answer is true. The evaluating mind questions everything, even itself. At this stage, thinking becomes conscious and responsible. You stop following models and start creating your own parameters. You stop looking for answers and begin crafting better questions. But there's a challenge. Judging is not the same as criticizing. Judgment requires balance, the courage to doubt without cynicism, and the humility to learn without submission. The mature mind doesn't seek to be right. It seeks to be clear, and clarity is the highest form of intellectual power. Evaluating is the art of giving weight to ideas. It's the moment when thought becomes a compass, and you, finally, stop being a student and become a decision maker. So to strengthen level 5, do this. Ask, why does this matter all the time? When studying or reflecting, don't accept anything without purpose. If an idea doesn't change how you see, act, or think, maybe it doesn't deserve your time. Create value hierarchies. List what is essential, what is useful, and what is dispensable. This trains your mind to filter and prioritize. Debate with respect, but without submission. Listen to opposing opinions, but evaluate arguments, not voices. Thinking for yourself is the first act of intellectual freedom. Write critical syntheses. After reading something, note what you agree with, what you disagree with, and what you still don't understand. This simple habit turns reading into active thought. And finally, suspend quick judgment. Rushing to conclude is the enemy of clarity. Wait, observe, question. Discernment is born in the silence between stimulus and response. When you learn to judge with lucidity, you begin to see the world as a board of possibilities. But the evaluating mind doesn't create, it refines. And that's why the next level is the most creative of all, the level of synthesis, innovation, and creation, the mind that builds new ideas from what already exists. Now imagine the moment when thought stops following known paths and begins to carve new trails. This is the sixth level of the mind, creation, where knowledge turns into invention. Here the mind ceases to be just a tool for memory and becomes a source of originality. At the fifth level, you learn to judge what's worth your time. But at the sixth, you go further. You use everything you know to generate something that doesn't yet exist. It's the stage where thought becomes art. The creative mind combines old ideas into new forms, sees solutions where others see limits, and turns chaos into meaning. Creation isn't a gift. It's the natural result of a mind that has learned to think deeply. Those who understand, apply, analyze, and judge with clarity will, inevitably, create. Because creation is the reflection of a mind that has mastered the fundamentals and dares to go beyond them.
But here's the secret. Creation doesn't come from overexertion. It comes from mental freedom. The best ideas appear when the brain is relaxed, curious, and playing with possibilities. Creativity is thought in its purest form of curiosity, the same state you had as a child. The creative mind doesn't fear mistakes. It understands that every mistake is just an attempt with another name. It doesn't seek perfection. It seeks discovery. That's why creation is one of the most human acts there is. It's the mind in dialogue with the unknown. So from today on, play with what you've learned. Take something you've mastered and change the rules. If you've learned a theory, test its opposite. If you've mastered a technique, invent a new way to apply it. To create is to play with knowledge. Ask questions that have no ready answers. The creative mind moves through curiosity, not certainty. Ask, what if? Why not? How could this work differently? Impossible questions open invisible doors. Mix different worlds. Great ideas are born when two fields collide. Take a concept from science and apply it to art. Take something from philosophy and link it to technology. Genius lives in the intersections. Write down everything that comes to mind. Ideas are fragile. Write down even the ones that seem absurd. Sometimes that's where innovation begins. Create to understand. Don't wait to master everything before you start producing. When you create, you understand your studies more deeply. The mind learns best in the act of expression. When the mind creates, it touches the edge of what it means to be human, the point where knowledge turns into meaning. But there's still one level higher, awareness of your own thinking. The moment when the mind not only thinks, but observes itself thinking. And that's where the seventh and final level begins.
Now imagine your mind standing in front of a mirror. Not an ordinary mirror, but one that reflects thought itself. You're not just thinking, you're watching how you think. This is the seventh and final level of the mind, reflection. At this level, learning stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you control consciously. It's the stage of cognitive self-awareness, when you understand your own mental process. You're no longer the student trapped in the maze, you're the architect observing it from above. At the sixth level, you create, but at the seventh, you refine the creator within. You begin to recognize the patterns behind your successes, the triggers behind your mistakes, the useless repetitions, and the moments when your thinking becomes lazy. Here, the mind becomes the tool, and you become the operator. Reflection is the point where wisdom surpasses knowledge, because knowing something means being able to explain it, but understanding how you learn, think, and decide, that gives you the power to transform everything. The reflective mind observes its own behavior. It asks itself, why did I understand this easily, but not that? What did I do differently when I truly learn something? What distracts me? What deepens me? These questions don't just correct mistakes, they help you design a new way of thinking. Those who master this level master their own growth, because power no longer lies in the content, but in the process. You no longer depend on external techniques, you become your own method. And here's the most beautiful part. The more you reflect, the more you realize that thought has no end.
The mind that observes itself grows in spirals. Each turn brings new understanding. Each mistake reveals another layer of itself. So explain what you've learned out loud, not for others, but for yourself. If you can't explain it clearly, it's because you don't yet understand it. External clarity is born from inner clarity. Analyze your own learning process. After you've learned something, write down, how did I learn this? What worked? What held me back? This simple habit turns studying into continuous self-development. Accept mistakes as diagnosis, not defeat. When you fail, don't blame yourself. Observe it like a scientist studying a phenomenon. Every mistake contains a map of what you haven't yet understood. Create rituals of metaconsciousness. Take 10 minutes a day to think about your own thinking. Ask yourself, what is my mind doing right now? Is it creating or repeating? That small pause reorganizes the brain to operate at higher levels of awareness. Keep a curious gaze. A wise mind isn't the one that knows the most. It's the one that never stops asking questions. Curiosity is the fuel of reflection, the mirror that keeps the ego from becoming blindness. When you reach the 7th level, you realize that a genius isn't born ready. He is built, layer by layer, consciousness by consciousness. And at the end of this journey, you understand that mastering the mind isn't about memorizing the world, but about understanding your own process of understanding. Those who reach this level know that thinking is an art, and learning is the most beautiful act of becoming human. Now, for all of this to truly sink into your subconscious, write in the comments, I choose to think at higher levels. Doing that will anchor the idea in your mind and inspire others to do the same. And if you want to keep evolving with me, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because in the next videos, we'll go even deeper on this journey toward the total mastery of the mind. You're not here by accident. You're here because you truly want to think. And that is the first sign of a genius mind.
I'm going to teach you a trick right now, right here. And this trick, this single technique will change how your brain works forever. Not gradually, not eventually, instantly. Pause for effect. You're going to walk out of here today with a completely different relationship to learning, to thinking, to understanding. You'll never approach a problem the same way again. Sound too good to be true. I thought so too. But then I studied Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize winner, revolutionary physicist, one of the greatest minds of the 20th century, and I discovered something shocking. His genius wasn't mystical. It wasn't genetic. It wasn't luck. It was a trick, a simple, repeatable, learnable trick that he used on everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Physics, obviously, but also biology, art, music, safecracking, whatever caught his attention. Aid, lean in heats, and the most beautiful part. Once you learn this trick, you can use it immediately on anything, and you'll feel your brain unlock in real time. I'm going to prove it to you. By the end of this talk, you're going to use this trick yourself, and you're going to experience what it feels like when your brain suddenly gets smarter. Ready? Let's go. But as we walk across stage first, let me show you what this trick is now. It's not about reading faster. It's not about memorizing more. It's not about studying harder or longer or with more focus. All of those things might help, but they're not the trick. The trick is about something else entirely. Something that most people never discover because the entire education system is designed to prevent you from learning it. Let me tell you a story that reveals everything. Share this with intensity. It's 1961. Feynman is at Caltech. He's already famous. Nobel Prize, revolutionary work, legendary teacher. And a student comes to him with a question. Professor Feynman, can you explain why spin 1/2 particles obey Fermi, Dirac statistics? Now, this is standard quantum mechanics. Any physics professor knows this. There's a textbook answer. There's a derivation. There's an explanation that everyone gives. And you know what Feynman says? I'll prepare a freshman lecture on it. Let me break it down to that level. The student is confused. A freshman lecture. This is advanced quantum mechanics. But Feynman is serious. He goes away to work on it. A pause, slow down now, and a few days later he comes back. And he says something that changes everything. I couldn't do it. I couldn't explain it simply enough. Which means we don't really understand it. Afar, let that land on. Do you hear what just happened? A Nobel Prize winner, one of the smartest humans alive, just admitted he doesn't really understand something. Not because he can't do the math, not because he doesn't know the equations, but because he can't explain it simply. And in that moment, Feynman revealed the trick, the technique that made him a genius, the method that unlocked his brain power. Direct statement. If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it. That's not just a nice saying. That's not motivational fluff. That's the trick. That's the entire method, right there. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people hear that quote and they nod and they move on. Yeah, explain things simply. Got it. But they don't actually do it. They don't understand what it means. They don't realize this is the most powerful cognitive technique ever discovered. Tasks are get intensive. So let me break it down for you. Let me show you exactly how this trick works and why it unlocks your brain instantly. When you try to explain something simply, when you force yourself to use plain language, no jargon, no technical terms, as if you're teaching a child, something amazing happens in your brain. You can't hide anymore. Explain this, see. Most of the time, we fool ourselves about what we understand. We read something, we nod along, we think, okay, that makes sense. We hear an explanation, we recognize the words, we assume we get it. But we don't. We're confusing familiarity with understanding. We're mistaking recognition for comprehension. And our brain lets us get away with it. Because our brain is comfortable with surface-level knowledge. It doesn't want to do the hard work of real understanding. But when you try to explain something simply, you can't fake it. You can't hide behind complexity. You can't use jargon to mask confusion. Ace your gestures. You either understand it well enough to make it clear or you don't. There's no middle ground. And the moment you try to explain something and get stuck, the moment you realize, wait, I can't actually explain this part clearly, that's the moment your brain unlocks. Because now you know exactly what you don't understand. You've exposed the gap. You found the edge of your knowledge. And make the point. And that's where learning happens. Not in the comfortable areas where you already understand, but at the edges, at the gaps, where you get stuck. This is the trick. Use simple explanation as a diagnostic tool, as a way to reveal what you don't actually understand yet. Let me show you this in action. Share this example. Let's say you're trying to learn about compound interest. You've heard about it. You know it's important. You've maybe even seen the formula. Most people stop there. They think they understand compound interest. They could probably pass a test on it. But do they really understand it? Let's use Feynman's trick. Hey, do this, Liv. Explain compound interest to me like I'm 10 years old. No formulas. No fancy words. Just simple explanation. You start, well, compound interest is when you earn interest on your interest. Why? Wait, what's interest? Explain interest without using the word interest. It's money that grows. Why does it grow? Who makes it grow? Where does it come from? Pause, we see what's happening. You thought you understood compound interest. But when you try to explain it simply, you realize there are gaps. Pieces you can't articulate. Concepts you can't make clear. That's not failure. That's the trick working. You just revealed what you need to learn. Continue the example. So you go back. You think about it, you break it down. And you try again. Okay? Imagine you give someone $100 to hold for you. And they say thank you by giving you $10 extra at the end of the year. So now you have $110. The next year, you let them hold all $110, and they give you 10% again. But this time, 10% of 110 is $11, so you end up with 121. Each year, you're getting 10% of a bigger amount, so your money grows faster and faster. That's compound interest. Snap, now you understand it. Not because you memorized the formula, but because you can explain it to a child. You've built real understanding. That's the trick. That's how it works. Here's the direct address, and here's the magic. The moment you successfully explain something simply, your brain has undergone a transformation. You don't just understand that one concept better. You've strengthened your ability to understand everything better, because you've taught your brain to demand real understanding, not surface knowledge. Now let me show you why this works so powerfully. Why this technique unlocks your brain in a way that other learning methods don't. Explain the neuroscience side thing. When you just read something or hear something, Your brain does minimal processing. It recognizes patterns. It stores information superficially. It creates weak, fragile connections. But when you try to explain something, when you have to retrieve the information, organize it, translate it into your own words, find examples, anticipate questions, your brain does deep processing. It's like the difference between looking at a map and actually walking the route. Looking at the map gives you surface familiarity. Walking the route builds deep spatial understanding. Make it concrete. Every time you explain something simply, you're forcing your brain to retrieve the information from memory. Active recall, the most powerful learning technique. Organize it logically, building structured understanding, not random facts. Translate it into simple language, ensuring you understand the concepts, not just the words. Find analogies and examples, connecting new knowledge to existing knowledge. Anticipate confusion, identifying where the explanation might break down. Idars or gesture widely. That's 5 different cognitive processes happening simultaneously. All of them strengthening your understanding. All of them building real, permanent knowledge. No other learning technique does all of this at once. That's why this trick is so powerful. Feynman used this trick his entire life. Not just on physics, on everything. Someone asks him about art. He doesn't just say, I like art. He explains, art is interesting because the artist is trying to show you something about how they see the world. The colors they choose, the shapes they emphasize, the details they include or leave out, all of that tells you what they think is important. Looking at art is like reading someone's mind through pictures.
Exposit a simple.
Clear. A 10-year-old could understand it, and in making it that clear, Feynman had to really understand art himself, not just appreciate it, understand it. Someone asks him why the sky is blue. He doesn't say, Rayleigh scattering. He says, sunlight is made of all different colors mixed together. When that light hits air molecules, the blue colors bounce around more than the other colors. So when you look at the sky, you're seeing all that bounced blue light. That's why the sky looks blue and sunsets look red. You're seeing the light that didn't get bounced away. Thus, point Gaussian again, simple. Clear. And in the process of making it simple, Feynman had to deeply understand the physics of light and scattering and make the connection. This is what the trick does. It forces you to understand deeply so you can explain simply. And that deep understanding is what unlocks your brain power. Now let me give you the exact process. The step-by-step method you can use starting today. Present this clearly. Step 1, choose something you want to understand. Anything, a concept from work, something you're studying, an idea you find interesting, doesn't matter what, pick it. Step 2, get a blank piece of paper, or open a blank document, or just speak out loud. Whatever works for you, but make it blank, no notes, no references, just you and the blank page. Step 3, right at the top. How I would explain this to a 12-year-old. Why 12? Because 12-year-olds are smart enough to understand real concepts, but they don't know any jargon. They need plain language, clear examples, simple logic. I continue the steps. Step 4, start explaining. Write or speak everything you know about the topic. Use simple words, short sentences, clear examples. Pretend you're talking to an actual kid. Step 5, notice where you get stuck. This is crucial. Pay attention to the moments where you can't explain something clearly. Where you want to use a technical term but can't define it. Where the logic gets fuzzy. Where you're not sure why something works. Those stuck points, that's gold. That's where you don't really understand yet. Emphasize this. The step 6, go back to the source material. But here's the key, don't just read everything. Focus specifically on the parts where you got stuck. Study only those pieces. Break them down. Think them through. Step 7, try explaining again. With your new understanding, see if you can get past the stuck points. Step 8, repeat steps 5 through 7 until you can explain the entire concept simply, from start to finish with no stuck points. A pause, that's it. 8 steps. You can do this entire process in 20 minutes for a simple concept, an hour for something complex. But when you're done, you don't just sort of understand the concept, you really understand it, deeply, permanently. Share a powerful example. Let me tell you about someone who used this trick and had their brain unlock in real time. I was teaching a workshop, and there's this woman there, let's call her Sarah, who's a marketing manager, smart person, successful career. But she tells me she feels like she's hit a ceiling. She keeps getting passed over for promotions to director level. I ask her, "Can you explain your company's marketing strategy to me like I'm 12?" She starts, "Well, we do integrated campaigns across multiple channels to drive engagement and conversions through a data-driven approach that leverages customer insights to optimize our funnel metrics." Let the jargon sink in. I stop her. I'm 12. I don't know what any of those words mean. Try again. Well, she's frustrated. But that's how we talk about it at work. That's the strategy. Maybe. But do you understand it? Doesn't continue the story. She thinks. She tries again. And she gets stuck. She realizes she can explain the tactics. We post on social media, we send emails, we buy ads. But she can't explain the strategy. The why behind the what. The logic connecting it all. So she goes back. She thinks about it. Really thinks about it. And 2 days later, she sends me an email. Holy shit. I just realized I've been doing marketing for 5 years and I didn't really understand marketing strategy. I could execute tactics, but I didn't understand the underlying principles, so I couldn't think strategically. No wonder they wouldn't promote me to director. Directors need to think strategically, and I was just executing tactically. Make the point, she used the trick. It revealed the gaps in her understanding. She filled those gaps. And 6 months later, she got promoted. Not because she worked harder, not because she learned more facts, but because she went from surface understanding to deep understanding. And that showed up in everything she did. That's what this trick does. It doesn't just help you understand one thing better. It transforms how you understand everything. Get practical. Now let me address some questions I know you're thinking. First, what if I'm trying to learn something really complicated? Can I really explain quantum mechanics or molecular biology or advanced mathematics to a 12-year-old? Yes. And if you can't, you don't understand it well enough yet. Explain Heaths. Feynman could explain quantum mechanics to undergraduates. Einstein could explain relativity to journalists. The best thinkers in any field can make complex ideas accessible, not by dumbing them down, but by understanding them so deeply they can find the simple truth underneath the complexity. If you can't do that, you haven't reached deep understanding yet. And that's okay. That's what the trick reveals. That's what you work toward. Another question. Second question. What if my field requires technical language? What if I can't explain my work without jargon? Then you don't understand your work as well as you think. Be direct. A technical language is useful for precise communication between experts. But if you can't also explain the same concepts in plain language, you're using jargon as a crutch. You're hiding behind complexity. The best professionals in any field can switch between technical language and plain language effortlessly, because they understand the concepts, not just the terminology. Third question. Isn't this time consuming? Don't I learn slower if I have to explain everything simply? In the moment. Yes. Over time, no. Asaka explained the paradox. When you just read something quickly, you feel like you're learning fast. You cover lots of material. You feel productive. But a week later, you've forgotten most of it. A month later, it's gone. You have to learn it again. When you use Feynman's trick, you learn slower in the moment, but you remember longer. You understand deeper. You can apply it more flexibly. So which is actually faster? Learning something 5 times superficially, or learning it once deeply? Make it personal. I'll tell you from experience, I used to be a fast learner. I'd read a book in a day, take a course in a weekend, consume information rapidly, and I couldn't understand why nothing stuck, why I'd forget everything, why I couldn't apply what I'd learned. Then I discovered Feynman's trick, and everything changed. Now I learn slower. I spend more time with less material. I explain things simply to myself constantly, and I remember everything. I can apply concepts years later. I make connections between different domains. My understanding compounds over time instead of evaporating. Slow learning is fast learning. The trick makes you slower in the moment and faster over time. Now let me show you how to practice this trick. How to make it a habit that transforms your brain permanently. I share this method every day. Pick one thing you encountered that day. Could be from work, could be from reading, could be from a conversation, could be from a video you watched, doesn't matter. Take 5 minutes and explain it simply. Out loud, or in writing, or to someone else. Force yourself to make it clear enough for a kid to understand. That's it. 5 minutes a day. One concept a day. I explain what happens. At first, this will feel hard. You'll get stuck a lot. You'll realize how much you don't really understand. But over time, over weeks and months, something shifts. You start noticing gaps in your understanding immediately. You start thinking in simple explanations naturally. You start demanding deep understanding from yourself automatically. Your brain rewires itself. The trick becomes your default mode of thinking. Share the transformation. And when that happens, everything changes. Conversations become learning opportunities because you're constantly testing your understanding. Meetings become clearer because you demand simple explanations from others. Problems become easier because you understand them at a deeper level. You don't just know more, you understand better. And that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Let me give you one more story. This one is about Feynman himself, and it shows the trick at its most powerful. I'll tell this with admiration now. It's the 1980s. The Space Shuttle Challenger explodes. NASA's investigating. They've assembled a presidential commission with famous people, military leaders, bureaucrats, smart people, important people, and they bring in Feynman as a token physicist, someone to rubber stamp their findings. But Feynman doesn't play that game. He starts investigating, really investigating, and he keeps asking simple questions. How cold was it that morning? What happens to the O-rings when they get cold? Can you show me an O-ring? That should build the tension. The NASA engineers give him complicated explanations. Technical jargon, complex systems, everyone's nodding along. But Feynman keeps asking, but what actually happens? Can you explain it simply? And they can't. They know the technical details, but they don't really understand the physics of what's happening. So Feynman does an experiment. Live, during a public hearing, he takes a piece of O-ring material. He puts it in ice water. He shows how it becomes brittle and stops sealing. Masser deliver the conclusion, one simple demonstration, one clear explanation, and suddenly everyone understands what went wrong. The O-rings got too cold. They failed to seal. The shuttle exploded. NASA had all the technical data, all the smart engineers, all the complex analysis. But they couldn't see the simple truth until Feynman made it clear. Make the point, that's the power of this trick. It cuts through complexity. It exposes what's really happening. It reveals truth. And you have that power now. Every time you demand simple explanation from yourself or from others, you're wielding that power. I just get emotional. Let me tell you what this trick has meant to me personally. Because this isn't just academic for me. This changed my life. I used to think I was a mediocre thinker. I could memorize stuff, I could pass tests. But I didn't feel smart. I felt like everyone else just naturally understood things I had to work hard to grasp. Then I discovered Feynman's trick, and I realized nobody naturally understands things. Some people just process deeply without realizing it, and most people process superficially and fool themselves into thinking they understand. That's her personal revelation. Once I started using this trick, once I started demanding simple explanations from myself, I stopped being mediocre. Not because I got smarter, but because I started actually understanding instead of just recognizing. Problems I couldn't solve before became solvable. Concepts I couldn't grasp became clear. Connections I couldn't see became obvious. My brain unlocked, and it can happen for you too. Direct challenges. So here's what I want you to do. Right now, before you leave, before you forget, take out your phone, or a piece of paper, or just think it through out loud. Pick something you think you understand, something from your work, or from something you're studying, or from a conversation you had recently, and try to explain it simply, like you're talking to a 12-year-old. Use plain language, clear examples, no jargon. Pause it. Do it now. I'll wait. Give them a moment. Did you get stuck? Did you hit a point where you couldn't explain something clearly? Where you wanted to use a technical term but couldn't define it? A point. That's the trick working. You just discovered what you don't really understand yet, and now you know exactly where to focus your learning. That feeling, that moment of realization, that's your brain unlocking. That's you seeing the edge of your knowledge. That's you about to grow. A build to conclusion. Feynman once said, I learned very early the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. Most people spend their lives collecting names, terms, credentials, labels. They sound smart, they look educated, but they don't understand. Feynman spent his life knowing things, really knowing them. deeply understanding them, being able to explain them to anyone, slow down, and the trick, the technique that made this possible, was simple explanation. Constantly demanding that he could make complex ideas clear, constantly testing his understanding against the standard of can a child understand this? That's the trick. That's the whole method, right there. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. And the moment you try to explain it and get stuck, you've found where you need to learn. For final challenges, so use this trick. Today, tomorrow, every day, on everything you want to understand. Make it a habit. Make it automatic. Make it your default mode of thinking. Demand simple explanation from yourself. Demand it from others. Don't accept complexity as a substitute for understanding. And watch what happens. Watch your brain unlock. Watch your understanding deepen. Watch yourself become the thinker you're capable of being. Pause, smile, because here's the secret. You're not limited by your intelligence. You're limited by your methods. And now you have Feynman's method. The question isn't whether this trick works. The question is, will you use it? Walk to center stage A. I showed you the trick. I proved it works. I gave you the exact process. I challenged you to try it right now. The rest is up to you. Will you go back to surface level learning? Or will you demand deep understanding? Will you accept complexity? Or will you insist on clarity? Will you fool yourself about what you know? Or will you use this trick to reveal the truth? Final statement. The trick is simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. It means powerful. It means it works. It means it can transform your brain starting right now. Use it. Trust it. Watch it unlock your brain power instantly. Pause to say thank you. Okay, beep. And if you want to go deeper into Feynman's techniques, if you want more methods, more insights, more ways to unlock your brain power, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're breaking down exactly how one of history's greatest minds worked with techniques you can apply immediately. Join us. Let's unlock our brains together. See you in the next one.